Welcome to our Living Stones podcast, where we gather to discuss all matters of faith and life as members of God's household. In a world that often leaves us feeling fragmented and disconnected, our hope is that Living Stones will help further connect us as we pursue the Lord together. I'm your host, Savina, and today we're talking about parenting. Specifically how our own stories, instincts, and upbringing shape the way that we parent. And joining us again is Caroline Strunk, who is a beloved member of years now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
She is one of the home builders leaders, which is our marriage and our family ministry at church. She's a fellow creative and a licensed therapist. So I know that today's conversation is going to be full and fun and full of encouragement and challenge and insight. So I'm really excited that you're here,
I
Caroline.
feel like these are some high expectations.
I feel like even the last time I did this whole intro of you because that's how much I like you.
Oh,
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming in again and
well, thank you for having me back.
sharing your wisdom. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so before we dive in, have you heard how many babies are supposed to be born at our church this year?
The rumor at our home builders leadership planning meeting was like 20 something.
No,
Is that true?
20? Wait, but for real, is it 20?
No, I don't know. Is it 20?
I heard it was like 14 or I mean, no,
That's still a
someone
lot.
said 14 like a second ago.
That's only like 6 off.
That's crazy.
There might be some secret babies that we don't know about.
But also, there is a couple that's having two at one time. Like the twins.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
crazy. I mean, I know she's going to be
Our
bursting
church is
soon,
so
too.
good at popping out babies. It's kind of incredible.
It is just crazy to me how many pregnant people there. But at the same time, such a big blessing.
It is.
It's amazing and such a blessing for me to see our church flourishing in this way. But that also goes to show how many parents we have, right?
Mhm.
Not just new parents that will be, or couples that will be new parents this year, but just in general, how many parents kind of make up the sum of our members at our
Mhm.
church. So I feel like today's episode and topic is so timely.
Yes.
Especially if we're going to be hitting our record number of babies. All you parents listening in, please listen all the way. But also, I feel like this is really good for parents to be, couples that are hoping and planning to be parents. So I'm really excited.
Me too. And I had the exact same thought about this episode just being so timely because, I mean, like you said, we have so many, new parents. I think that we have a lot of parents who are kind of already navigating the grade school years, a lot who are just in the thick of it with babies and toddlers. And as you said, maybe 14, maybe 20, maybe more, who are just starting their parenting journey for possibly the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we're thinking about like life as a journey in general, I mean, I think a lot of our earlier seasons tend to transition a little bit more gracefully or gradually. We're children and we grow into teenagers, and then a lot of us go off to either college or the workforce or the military,
Mhm.
and just kind of become more independent, learn about ourselves and the world around us.
Mhm.
Some of us fall in love, get married and start building a life with someone. And it's definitely not to say that these seasons don't come with their own challenges, because they absolutely do. But I mean, there are very few things in life that I think just humble you and test you and shatter you and transform you, just quite like parenting, or as abruptly as parenting. Right.
And just for a little context and a little background, for those that didn't listen to the previous episodes with you in it, or those that may not even know you very well or at all, are you a mother?
Yes, I am.
I mentioned that earlier, but to how many children?
So my husband and I, Josh, we have 3 children. And so we've been married for about 15 of the 20 years or so that we've been together. And so our oldest, Chloe, is a full on teenager now. She's 14, is going to be a freshman in high school this upcoming fall. My middle one, Noah, he is in 6th grade and will be going to middle school in the fall. And then my littlest, Olivia, is 7 years old. So,
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
you have a teenager. Actually, you have basically almost an adult.
yeah.
And then you have a little one.
Yes. It's got a full range.
So you and Josh definitely really been in it in terms of the messiness
Yes.
and getting into the thick of things, especially with each other. So
Definitely.
yeah, can you share more about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so, we were definitely in the thick of it for a lot of years. And I think one other thing that just kind of made it extra challenging for us and why this topic is like so important to me is that we got married pretty young. We were like not quite high school sweethearts and got married, pretty close right out of college and, started having kids soon after. And so we were like the first of our main friend group to have kids. And so like, it's one of those things where you just don't know what it's like until you're in it.
Yeah.
And even if you have the best friends in the world, I think that it's hard to relate. So, I mean, those years can be isolating, really without other people and just a community who gets it.
Yeah. Also that, like, as you were saying, because you guys were so young, I mean, how many of your other friends were having children? So
Right.
you guys were really navigating things together.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so I think that, marriage also kind of reflects back to us like the selfish versions of ourselves. But I think that parenting just takes it to a different level. I think that parenting has a way of revealing what's deepest in our hearts. I mean, of course, like the good things, like our capacity for love and just how powerful that is to love a child. But, also like the darker stuff, like our deepest fears, our insecurities, our values. And for many of us, just the unexamined, unresolved, and unfinished parts of our own stories.
Yeah.
Right. I think that when two people with two different upbringings come together to raise a family, it can be really beautiful and just really
Yeah. It can be messy. It can be
messy.
tough. It can collide.
So messy.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here today, I think, to talk about how couples with these very different upbringings, defaults, instincts, personalities, like you said, can move toward unity as they shepherd their home together.
Nice. I know that as you were talking about how, you, for example, you and Josh, you guys come from two different backgrounds. And so that comes with probably just two different thought processes, two different instincts.
Everything.
Right.
Right.
So I would love for you to maybe unpack that a little more.
Yeah. And so, when we're talking about two different people coming together, I always emphasize just to people like do the individual work, right? Because even if you have the most amazing partner in the world, like they're not mind readers, like they're not psychic, like they don't know what your past is like. So in counseling, like the whole, tell me about your childhood question is kind of seen as a cliche, but I think it's important, right? Like, I mean, there's a reason why it's a cliche. And I think it's important to really know and understand your own origin story, like why you are the way you are. Just because like these early life experiences, environments, and relationships really do directly shape our current present day attachment and relationship styles, emotional patterns, communication styles, conflict styles, our coping defense mechanisms, core beliefs and value systems, just the blueprints for parenting roles, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, I think that it's a key part of any premarital or marriage counseling conversation. But I think that you can also just explore it in conversations with a mentor, a pastor, or even just each other. I mean, when you and Sangsup got married, like, did you guys talk about this stuff? Like, was there like a marriage, premarital workshop or thing that you guys did?
Well, Pastor Paul, if you're listening, he was our marriage counselor, but he gypped us a little bit because marriage counseling was supposed to be like 3 days, but he just did it in one.
Maybe he just thought that you guys were so well equipped that you only needed one. You're like a gold star student.
Yeah. I mean, what was great about having Pastor Paul counsel us, though, was that he had a really good idea of what kind of person I was and had like somewhat of an idea of who Sangsup was. And so kind of like what you were saying, the premise of like Pastor Paul's thoughts of us were Davina, strong, very strong, like kind of does what she wants to do, highly opinionated, XYZ. And then Sangsup, quiet, very quiet, like very kind and supportive. And so, Pastor Paul's like biggest, I guess, advice to me was Sangsup's not a carpet. Don't walk all over him. And Sangsup, like, you need to speak up like when you need to. So that goes even like already into kind of our instincts, right? And a bit of our backgrounds. But this is something that Sangsup and I also understood coming in. And so there was an awareness of where I needed to kind of like give space, and then awareness of where he needs to challenge himself and step forward. So
Yeah.
yeah, already like there are those things.
And, as you're talking about that, I mean, I think it makes it clear, like, there are some differences that I think that are just, like, easier to spot, right? Like, if someone has, like, a big or vibrant personality and someone tends to be more reserved. But I think that what's so interesting with some of these differences is that, like, you might not know they're there.
Yeah.
I think that when we're talking about upbringing, for a lot of people, and especially maybe within, like, the Asian American community, there is a history maybe of like intergenerational patterns of dysfunction or even trauma. And so some of the differences might be like buried under the surface, and like they might not come up unless like you're having a fight
Yeah.
or things like that. And so I think that people are sometimes genuinely surprised by how different someone else's like, kind of rule book is like until they get married.
Yeah. And so kind of relating that back into parenting, then like, for example, how Sangsep was raised in terms of like his schedule and discipline versus how my parents just let me wildly go. Like, I'm sure that infiltrates the way that you parent and the way
100%.
and things that probably were even unspoken. It was just a lot of things that were expectations, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely. And so I think that when couples get married, like, they really do bring in this invisible rule book of like how they did stuff. And it doesn't even have to be like the big value related things. It could be like, which way do you, change diapers or do this? And it could be like all the little things that
How
add
often
up,
do you need
right?
to wash the baby and things like
Exactly.
that? Yeah.
And so one reflection exercise that I always really like to do, it's this like, in my house growing up. And it really just means, like walking through or talking through kind of a bunch of core, kind of pillars or concepts and describing to each other like what that looked like in your home. So like, for example, in my house growing up, love was shown by, or discipline looked like, obedience looked like, and so on, going through things like emotions or communication, conflict, or the role of mother or father. What did success look like? How did your family or parents define failure? What did faith look like? And because a lot of times the portraits that emerge from each partner just are so, so different.
As we're speaking and as you're sharing, and like when you went through the list just now, I am thinking of literally all my friends at church that have kids, and all of them have very big differences. And so I think an exercise like this is extremely helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think it just really helps to name and normalize some differences early on. Just because I think that parenting differences can very easily lead to parenting disagreements, which can quickly devolve into a right versus wrong mindset. So I think that having these conversations really helps us to shift from a default posture of criticism and judgment, like you're doing it wrong, or, why are you doing it this way? To one of curiosity and empathy. And so it's, help me understand your perspective, or even connecting the dots of like, oh, like I see why,
Yeah.
you do it this way. And I think over time, this also helps us frame some differences as God designed complementarity instead of incompatibility.
Yeah. And I feel like even having that sense of self-awareness, right? Like whether it's for yourself or for your spouse, especially if you're a young parent, to even recognize, oh, here's a difference.
Yeah.
Like how do we, or how should I approach this instead of in my instinctive anger?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's an exercise that we all need to practice too.
And so I think this ties into the next question that you had, written for us, which is this idea of finding unity without shaming or belittling the other parent. Because, to your point about like reacting instinctively in anger, I mean, that typically comes out as like shaming or belittling,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that if we just even stop there and ask like, okay, but then like, why? Why do we end up shaming and belittling? And I think that, well, like some differences are just easier to normalize than others. Like if we have differences in like style, or like we like different food, or if we like different music, I think that we're just so quick to frame that as like just differences in preference and like see it as diversity and a good thing. But I think, let's say topics like, I don't know, like spanking versus not spanking, or discipline. Now, I think it becomes about values. I think that we frame it as a reflection of character. The stakes become higher. And I think that's when we get judgmental. And when we sort of enter that space, shaming and belittling are typically not far behind.
I have noticed that there is kind of a general theme, like general, there are outliers, but general as in like fathers and how they discipline their sons is like atrocious to mothers.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have friends within our church, and so I know like moms that are listening, they can totally relate. If they see that their husband is disciplining their son,
Mm-hmm.
or even daughter, to the mom it seems so harsh, while to the dad it's like, wait, this is just the right thing. And so right there's like that difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like because the feelings can get so strong on both sides, it's like it takes an enormous amount of self-control to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and be self-reflective and be like, okay, this is a difference. It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of like what you said, I like that you kind of you talked about music.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like this type of music. And so it's not that the parents are trying to wrong their children. It's just father has a certain standard of what is, I guess, correct behavior versus what mother has a
Mm-hmm.
standard of what is
Yeah.
correct behavior.
Well, so as you said that, like I know you added, also daughters later, but you started out kind of like
Sons.
making a point of fathers disciplining their sons,
Mhm.
and I think that there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah.
So earlier we were talking about how parenting sort of reveals what's like deepest in your hearts,
Mhm.
right? And I don't think that it's a coincidence that the way that fathers discipline their sons, and in some ways like the parallel to that, like how mothers might discipline their daughters,
Mhm.
just the different dynamic there. And again, not all fathers, not all mothers, not all sons and daughters, but I have also noticed just in my personal life and also in the work that I do, it's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
And I have actually had, on more than one occasion, fathers kind of confess that they wanted a daughter because I remember the way that he said it specifically, loving a daughter just feels so much more uncomplicated.
Mhm.
Because I think that with parents, we try not to, but I think that sometimes it's hard not to see ourselves in our own kids. And I think that if you're recognizing something that's positive, like if you're, say, like a star athlete father and you see that your son has similar tendencies, oh, that's great.
Mhm.
But I think that the opposite can be just as impactful in a negative way, where if you see something in your child that either reminds you of something in yourself that you don't like or that you struggle with, or maybe you feel like your kid is showing or reflecting a personality trait or a value that goes so counter to your own, I think that's a space where just a lot of big emotions come up.
Yeah.
You know?
So I'd love to press more into that because we're kind of going into then the values.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's dependent on how each person was raised and their instincts, but then that then turns into, am I skipping anything, by the way?
No, I think we were talking about shaming and belittling and
Mhm.
judgmental and I guess getting judgmental about some differences
Yeah.
more than others.
Yeah. So yeah, then I think I'm skipping because then I'm very interested in why.
Mm-hmm.
I know we talked briefly about how, again, the different ways that we were raised and
Mm-hmm.
the instincts and how the differences aren't right or wrong. But then,
Yeah.
how do you approach then?
Mm-hmm.
How would you approach, or how would you speak to a couple that, I guess, struggles in that area
Mm-hmm.
of shaming and belittling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that you absolutely, I think, wanted to dig into the why it
Yeah.
happens.
I
But
always want to know the why.
yeah, and I guess we can go in either order. But if you're asking about the shame and the belittling, sort of the how we communicate, and
Mhm.
then moving into well, how do we apply this to what we're communicating about?
Mhm.
I guess maybe we can just pause for a second and just kind of understand the difference between what all of these different sort of communication terms are.
Yeah.
So the difference between shaming and belittling versus, say, criticizing constructively and communicating truth with grace. Because let's be honest, right? At some point, our partner is 100% going to do something that we don't like, that we don't agree with, or just, in the harder cases, it's actually, wrong or sinful or destructive.
Mhm.
And so for many of us, the shaming and the belittling is the default, right?
Mhm.
For depending on the families that we grew up with, maybe it was the voice of the critical parent that we internalized,
Mm.
right? And if we grew up in that family dynamic, maybe we even believe that it's our responsibility to pick out every flaw or point out everything that's not good enough because we're just trying to make the other person better,
Mhm.
right? So if we're breaking this down into practical terms, like the shaming and the belittling, what that communicates is something is wrong with you. Like you're failing as a parent, and I am above you or superior to you in this conversation. And so, what that sounds like, some of the key components in this type of language, you hear a lot of absolutes, like you hear a lot of, always or never. You hear a lot of character judgments, like, you're too controlling, you're too lazy, you're too soft. You hear a lot of contempt. And so in our previous podcast, we talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? And so contempt, showing that someone is beneath you through things like eye rolling or sarcasm, or bringing up past failures as ammunition. And so this might sound like, oh, you're so soft. Like, no wonder the kids don't listen to you, or you're acting just like your mom, or you're acting just like your dad. And so the consequences of this, it's pretty clear, right? I think that we can all relate to this. It triggers defensiveness. We tend to withdraw and isolate, or maybe even like counterattack if our response is like fight instead of flight. And so this immediately shuts down any open communication or collaboration, and the parents kind of end up viewing each other as opponents, right? I mean, do you feel like this is something that you've seen play out in all the families that
time?
you know?
Okay, but not judging anyone, because again, parenting is hard. We preface that in the beginning of this in this episode, but all of them, everyone. Like, no one is immune to it.
No one is immune to it. And I think that's why we're having this conversation. Like, we're not talking about the outliers. Like, we're talking about all of us and our like sinful hearts, right? And so, like, obviously we're not saying that you can't ever point out something negative, but I think the why and how we do it, it's so critical.
Yes.
And so constructive criticism, it communicates that something is happening that concerns me, but we're on the same team and we can work through this together. And so the key focus points here, we're focusing on the behavior and not the character. And we're also naming and focusing on the impact instead of assuming like malicious intent or a character flaw. And so this might sound like, hey, when the consequences change from day to day, I think our kids get confused because the expectations aren't clear. Can we talk about how we can be more consistent?
Yeah.
Right. So we're not attacking the person. We're pointing out a problem, maybe something that one partner is perpetuating more than the other.
Yeah.
But we're framing it as, like you said before, the two of us together versus the problem. And so then if we're taking this a step further, this is like truth, but like grace-filled truth. And so grace, again, is not ignoring or avoiding truth, but often it's like how that truth is delivered, that heart posture. And so this might start out with us affirming shared intentions or values, assuming the best of the other person, owning our own emotions and perspectives, and then inviting collaboration and connection. And so if we go back to this whole like, you're too soft or you're too harsh debate, maybe we could reframe this as like, hey, I know that you want the best for our kids, but when we discipline, sometimes I think that we're protecting or prioritizing different things. Can you help me understand your approach?
I love that. See, already, we're just friends, but I already feel disarmed by the way that you worded that.
That makes me.
You made it very clear, right? Of like what you're thinking and feeling, but in a way that was non-threatening.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And I think like you like, even if I was going to say like you shouldn't fake it, but even if you have to fake it, like the words will still have the same impact. And then you might find that there's like real empathy, that follows through.
Yeah. That's a lot of self-control and effort to, instead of be like, hey, you're just like your mom, right? Like, instead of like taking like that approach that's more natural, that's actually, I feel like it's a lot of love.
Yeah.
To like take a moment and be like, okay, so.
Yes. No, and I feel like that's something that needs to be acknowledged, because I hear from some people all the time, and this might be especially after they've been patient and waiting for a long time, of like, I can tell they don't mean it. Like, I need them to mean it. Like, but it's just like, you have to recognize the effort that they are trying something different.
Yeah.
Because I think that if it doesn't immediately look like what you want and you shut that person down, like do you think they're going to try again? Right.
Right. Yeah. And also I do also believe that it's about building something together. And so if that means having to build a language that becomes normalized between you two, that's helpful for each other, then that's part of marriage too, especially in parenting.
That's exactly right. And when you're talking about togetherness, like, we also have to remember, like, in this equation, that unity is not uniformity or sameness. It really does mean like shared direction or a shared commitment, and not that like you have to be carbon copies of each other. And the kids don't necessarily need to see you agree on everything. Like, they are allowed to know that mom and dad have different stances on things, but they do need to see you respect each other, and like, especially in matters of discipline, to see a united front.
Speaking of discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of talked about this earlier when I mentioned the example of the father being hard on the son. Let's dig into that a little more.
Do you want to go back to what you really wanted to talk about? The why and
Sure.
when they disagree about all the things.
So like again, generally speaking, there of course there are outliers. Fathers tend to have a certain stance on, I guess, like behavior coming from their boys
Mm-hmm.
versus, and then mothers having also a certain standard on like their daughters, and of course for their sons and daughters,
Mm-hmm.
like both ways too. So when it comes to the different stances of discipline and perspective, now that we just talked about what we talked about in like taking a moment to call out, or not call out, but like constructively criticize.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you, or how, what was the question? Oh yeah. What's the process when parents disagree on consequences, boundaries, and and expectations? Yeah, that was the question.
Oh, okay. And this is going to be like a theme that you notice here, like about pausing and slowing down, because like our default is for most people is to react. And I think that if you can just create a little pocket of time where you just stop and kind of turn on that filter of like, what am I trying to say? What and how is it going to come out? I think it can make all the difference in the world, right? So one helpful shift that I think parents can make right away is to slow down and pause and ask, or just like figure out, what are we actually disagreeing about right now? So for example, like if I were to come up with a scenario of like, we told our child to put away his screen and he talked back, and one parent, maybe the father, especially if it was like the boy, lashed out, was super harsh, really came down with like harsh discipline, and the mom didn't like it, right? So even within this one scenario, there's so many different pieces that we could be looking at. And so one could be the behavior itself, like what needs to be corrected. Was it like the over-reliance on the screen? Was it the talking back? Or the meaning attached to the behavior? One parent, maybe the father, like is viewing this as willful disobedience or defiance, and maybe the mom is viewing it as immaturity, overwhelm, or boundary testing. Maybe it's the lesson that we want our kids to learn. Is it obedience? Is it responsibility? Is it self-control? Is it empathy? Or maybe it's about the discipline or consequence itself. And, that can also be broken down into like the form that it takes, the severity, duration, timing, delivery, or the repair afterwards. And finally, just kind of whether or not the expectations that we have are reasonable or realistic to begin with, right? And so the process then, to answer your question, I think first is that like pause, like choose to not be reactive. Be united in front of the kids. So even if, say, as the mom, you don't agree necessarily with what the father did, unless it really was something that crosses over into that line of like emotional or physical abuse, to just, create that space to process or discuss in private. And then, once you have that, clarify and seek understanding with each other. And so, because I think that behind every like strong parenting opinion, there's usually a fear or a hope. And usually they're two sides of the same coin. Right. So, try to see that you're on the same team and like ask questions about like where they're coming from. What are you afraid will happen if we don't handle this well? Or what value feels most at stake to you? Or, what outcome are you hoping this teaches our child? And then, once you talk about that, I mean, I think that if you can make the other person feel a little bit seen, like you care about their perspective, I think that they're a lot more willing to hear your side as well. And then I think it becomes easier to move forward with aligning. So identifying the shared goal and then identifying a shared action where you can have that united response. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But I think that you can continue to like refine that process as you have these conversations.
Yeah. Let's put this into a live action scenario. And I'd like to ask you if you can think of a good example within your parenting with Josh that exemplifies something that something that made you two disagree strongly with one another in parenting.
In parenting.
Yeah. I mean, actually, it doesn't have to be strong, but just an example where your process got flushed out.
I'm trying to think now, because
then trying to understand, for you to understand where Josh is coming from, like that stepping back,
Mm-hmm.
and then also to take a minute where you're like, okay, this is why this is important to me,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so I was trying to think of this because this is not me trying to be like, oh, we don't have arguments about parenting anymore. But I think that we are in a different season of parenting where a lot of like the big explosive disagreements are a lot further behind us. And so I like nothing feels fresh right now, but I can think of an example very recently where I can see like the growth that we've made and how that might have looked different. And it actually ties in sort of perfectly with like the example that you gave. So the kids, like we had so much snow in our area recently. The kids were out of school for like a whole week. And it was kind of like this weird snow, right? Where like there was sleet and it froze and it's like our whole backyard is like ice. And we have a big hill in our backyard. And so it's like an ice slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids were, they're not even sledding because they're just like sliding down the ice on their butts. But like Noah was sliding down towards our neighbor's wooden fence and then like kind of catching himself on it. And I told him, specifically, hey, don't do that because I think it's going to break the fence. And so I think, later on in the day he forgot and he did it. And sure enough, he broke the fence.
He broke the fence.
He did. And so, this is where like I of course like chastise him in the moment, but then like Josh is working downstairs and I kind of thought about this and Josh is pretty measured in his reactions, but I think that he does, and I'm not saying this in like a critical way, like I think he is more tough on Noah for some of the reasons that we talked about before. I think that just as a father, he maybe holds Noah to different standards, or he just wants to, I guess, it's not that he doesn't hold the girls to the same standards, but he just wants to make sure he's doing his part as a father to kind of disciple and shepherd his son into growing into the kind of man that he wants him to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so just certain things I think can be extra triggering, like whether it's like impulse control or foolishness or disobedience. And so I, texted Josh and I gave him like a heads up of like, hey, this happened. I don't want you to like get super mad. So just giving you a heads up so you can kind of marinate in the news. And then so later Josh came up and he was just a lot more, I think like, gracious, like in his response, like with Noah and how he talked to him about it. And I think he was able to like deliver the message that he wanted, right? About like why it was wrong and how they're going to go to the neighbor together. And like, he's going to absolutely help Josh when he has to be the one to fix the fence. But I think kind of what you were getting at before about the big disagreement, I think that there would have been an earlier season where maybe he would have lashed out just kind of in a much harsher way. And then I kind of watching from the sidelines would have been maybe a little bit more saddened by like, oh, but then like, what is this going to do to their relationship?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that. How long have you guys been married now?
15 years.
This is 15 years of trial, error, wisdom learned, and now at a point where like this is like the fruit of, and honestly, a really good encouraging example of what a couple could look like down the line.
Oh,
If the initial right now is like my friends, like just getting really mad at each other or getting bitter. I know that even for my friends, the trajectory is to find themselves a lot more gracious to the other. And then kind of like what you did, even anticipating, like knowing, oh, Josh is probably going to get mad at this. Let me warn him instead of just, kind of letting things boil in your head and your heart. Like, oh, he's probably going to get mad again. So I like that it was very proactive even for you.
Yeah.
Like on both sides.
Thank you. And I also just want to emphasize too, like for me, this is not coming from a place of, oh, I think like Josh has anger management issues, so I just need to give him like a warning so that he can like diffuse before he comes up. This is me kind of honoring the fact that he has certain priorities that he really values, and that like those are precious to me too. And so just kind of thinking about how that might come up for someone in terms of like their feelings or their like gut reaction.
Yeah.
Just like being mindful of that, right? And I think this brings to mind what you were asking about earlier is like, what do you do when, say, the husband and wife have just different preferences or different priorities? I think the way that you kind of phrased it was like when one spouse leads more with like the feelings and the other with more structure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Exactly.
Right. And I think so how to value both without dismissing either. And I think first it's just we have to buy into this idea that both of them do have value. because it's not always intuitive for people. I think a lot of people who are very headstrong kind of think my way is the right way, and they don't leave a lot of space for someone who's different to also have just value that's not the same, right? And so, like in your mind, like why do you think that people dismiss either feelings or dismiss structure?
Well, I do think that feelings are stronger just because feelings are feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to this is general, um, but women tend to be the ones with stronger feelings. And I think that be, I don't know, because feelings are
Mm-hmm.
feelings come off stronger. And so feelings just tend to be stronger over structure. So if you look at even like our parent generation, what tends to happen, what I've noticed is like as our parents' generation ages, you see that the men tend to become a little more mute over
Mm-hmm.
time, right? And then the women tend to become the person that ends up doing everything, and then complain about their husband in front of everyone, or to their kids. And I know that's happened to me many times, like with my own parents. So
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel like that's an example, and I see that within my friends too. And I mean, I'm the biggest feeler. So even between Sangsib and I, if like there was a duel between us, it's if I don't have self-awareness, I can easily win. Um, Even though my argument is entirely illogical,
Mm-hmm.
just because my feelings are loud, he will just be like, okay, I'll defer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like that's why structure can be important if the person is matches like strong feelings or has really strong feelings about structure.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like people that tend to really value structure, they tend to be just a little more even keeled, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Again, generally speaking, but this is just what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that you're that's exactly right because I think for a lot of us when like we do feel feelings, even if you're not like the biggest feeler,
Hmm.
like they just feel so present and like powerful that we almost can't help but pay attention to them and then maybe think that they should play a role in like how we parent or that like, our kids' feelings are the things that we should pay attention to the most.
Hmm.
Whereas I think that structure can sound a little bit more like abstract and, can be secondary. But I think that like so much of what we've been discussing, like when parents disagree about feelings versus structure, again, it's not like that one is better than the other and it's
Hmm.
not about being right or wrong. But I think that it's helpful to really frame it in terms of what each parent is trying to protect or prioritize in their child's development. And so for emotional parenting, I think that it's helpful to reframe it as like being attunement oriented.
Hmm.
And so attunement, like tuning into someone, I would say is like noticing, understanding, and responding to another person's inner world with care. And I think that structured parenting, we could describe this as being stability oriented. And so to break this down a little bit, like attunement oriented emotional parenting,
Hmm.
that parent, and let's just say, the mom, in often cases, they're often trying to protect their child's inner world.
Hmm.
And so the question that they are often asking themselves is, does my child feel safe and loved with me
Hmm.
right now? And so their core values and instincts might be emotional safety, connection before correction,
Hmm.
modeling and fostering empathy, compassion, and emotional literacy. And just they really trust that a secure attachment is going to support long-term growth.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that stability oriented, structured parenting, let's say, oftentimes fathers, they are often trying to protect their child's future. And so the question that they're asking themselves is, what kind of adult are we shaping? And so their core values and instincts might look like consistency and predictability, responsibility, accountability, respect for authority and boundaries, self discipline, and
Hmm.
resilience. And they are really focusing on long term formation. And so parents really do need to recognize that children need both. Even if you look at just like famous psychological models of parenting, like if you know like that quadrant that has like the four different parenting styles, the authoritative style that combines warmth with discipline and structure is like widely regarded as like the healthiest approach.
Hmm.
And so emotion with the emotion or attunement without structure and stability can feel permissive, enabling, and unsafe because kids need structure to feel safe. But then similarly, structure and stability without emotion and attunement can feel unloving, cold, and harsh. And so what we're really doing is like trying to send complementary messages, right? The attunement part tells a child that they are seen and loved and safe. And structure tells a child that they are capable and guided. And it's not just psychology, right? Like, I mean, God parents us with both compassion and clear instruction. And so we would just be wise to follow his example.
Right. I love that. It's true. And this kind of goes back to the very beginning, once again, to this episode where that conversation is needed to talk about the values. When you were talking about premarital, and like how that person, how the other person was, or how your spouse was raised, and their thoughts, and I guess, yeah, again, values of life. And so like it's so like the when you reword it like this, it makes so much more sense. And even I have that much more compassion for, let's say, the fathers of our church. But in the moment, it just sounds like pick up your toys now, clean up now, don't do that. And so it's so easy to take that and for the mom, or the wife to be like, why are you so mean? But to kind of take a step back and see how these values are actually very, very important for his future, let's say. I think it's almost revolutionary to hear it this way. Like to translate that one sentence into, well, these are clearly his values. And so I can be on the same page with him. If it's clear, it's both my feelings for my child and then his feelings for the same child is the same. Like it's love all around.
Love is the same. Yeah. And I think it's worth pointing out too, like, kind of going back to this idea of how upbringings shape us. I mean, some of these responses and like what's so important to us also comes from a place of like either hurt or what we learned or how we learned to protect ourselves. Right. So say a man grew up, or like this husband grew up and he didn't have anyone either caring for him or he had to be really independent and be a provider on his own. One of his early life lessons was no one's going to take care of you. Like you have to either be the provider, learn how to take care of yourself to survive in this world. And so say he sees his kid not pick up his toys or just kind of shirk other responsibilities. For him, he might see that as like, oh, you are relying too much on other people to do things for you. And that's not acceptable. Right. And so even if like that's not maybe obviously the kid's intent, right? I think the dad who's lived through all those other seasons kind of in his life, I mean, he's seeing it through a different lens.
Man, this parenting stuff sounds hard, Caroline. Like there's so much thoughtfulness, and again, a sense of self-awareness, and then on top of that, an understanding to take that second to try to interpret why, right, in that moment. But it can be done.
It can.
It can be done.
And I just want to like clarify, I don't think that the expectation is that like you are figuring out and unpacking all of this stuff in the moment. But I think that's why the repair is so important, right? Like in the moment, if it plays out that way, okay. But then at some point, like go back and revisit that. And I think that's a lot of what maybe is missing, that people don't go back to revisit that moment or have a conversation when they're not reactive. Because say like, in your example, the wife is watching the husband do it and she snaps back at him like, you're just being so mean. If they're both kind of escalated at that point and they don't go back to just dig a little bit deeper into like, where did that come from? Or like, what about that was so upsetting? You're not going to gain this deeper level of understanding and empathy for each other. And you might not actually grow to the point where you see these different or differences as complementary strengths. You just see them as differences that are bad.
Yeah. But, as we're talking about the differences, right? I like that you ended your sentence with complementary, because, and the example of God, how God is both someone who is a disciplinarian, but also just as much of a loving and gracious and kind father. So how can we help our listeners, our couples, our future marriages and future parents and current parents on how to, I guess, appreciate that understanding of, following God in
Yeah.
parenting. Yeah.
I love that question. I think it just kind of starts with acknowledging and like respecting that like God on purpose did not make us the same. Like there is a purpose to our differences, and that when these differences are honored, they can become a gift rather than a source of friction. Because parenting really was never meant to be carried by one strength alone.
Mhm.
And so once you're able to, I guess, accept that framework that like differences can be complementary and they can be strengths. I think this is where you kind of focus back on your own marriage and look at your partner through that lens of appreciation, like you said, and kind of invite couples to reflect on, where each partner steps in with confidence. Like, what does your partner do well? Oftentimes, like you said, one parent might be quicker to notice emotions or protect connection. Someone else might find it easier to push their child a little bit more and provide that structure, direction, and boundaries.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, like these differences often can line up along a mother father dynamic. But I also do want to acknowledge that, not all men, not all women, there's a wide range of personalities and temperaments and gifts that we bring into parenting. And so we don't have to force ourselves into these kind of, rigid stereotypes or lanes to parent faithfully. But I think that there is just more harmony when we respect the spiritual framework that God gave us. And that might mean, learning more about what mutual submission looks like. But I think that when you're going back to what you said about like actually have the couples talk to each other
Mhm.
and want to learn about each other. And so you can take 10 minutes to finish these sentences. One strength that I see in you bringing to parenting is, or our kids benefit from you because. And then speaking as a co-parent, like a place that I lean on you is, and then like if there's some area of growth that you want to deliver graciously, like a place I'm learning to still, or a place I'm still learning to trust your approach is, right? And I think it invites just deeper conversations. And so it's funny, I've actually worked with some couples where I guess just they've been through a very long, hard season. And I have had couples or partners in sessions be like, nothing. I can't think of a single strength. And then that's really hard. And
That's
so
so
I'm going
hard.
to just put it this way. Listen, if you're having trouble naming your partner's strength, this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but like start with a weakness
Mm.
because I think that every strength pushed too far can become a weakness. And so we're going to maybe trace the weakness backward. And so, for example,
Oh, I love
like
that.
say we take a positive quality like, I don't know, just like confidence, right? I think most people would agree that confidence is a positive trait.
Mhm.
But if you almost imagine like a scale or like a slider, if you push it too far in one direction, that looks like, pride, it looks like arrogance. But
Mhm.
then if you kind of push it all the way to the other end, maybe it's like, meekness or having low self confidence. And so confidence is like the balanced version that you're seeing,
Mhm.
right? And to be clear, we should never reframe abusive or neglectful behavior into strengths. Like that's not what I'm talking about
Mhm.
here. We're talking about kind of like normal human imperfect
Yes.
tendencies. And I say this because if you can name the good part of it, that your partner might be more open to receiving the growth part of it. And so, as another example, if say I don't know, like one partner wants to tell the other, you tend to be passive, right? The positive way to frame this is that you strongly value peace and harmony. You're very
Peacemaker.
cautious about escalating conflict and you're not one to just kind of drop big emotional, atom bombs in our discussions,
Mhm.
right? And so it's like acknowledging like, hey, like this is coming from a good place, not necessarily that like you don't care.
Mhm.
And then I think that if you can deliver it that way, then you can follow up with, but healthy leadership and change sometimes call for discomfort and that's okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. This is so encouraging to hear. And, especially for newer parents, and if they listen through this episode, this is really setting them up to really, um, for the trajectory to be like Caroline and Josh, 15 years later. But, we do have couples that are in the thick of it. Like
Mhm.
you mentioned, like you had some clients that couldn't think of anything positive. And so we do have families and couples that are maybe like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years into being parents. And so to dismantle the way they've been talking to each other for however many years, and then changing that now could be really, really, really difficult.
Absolutely. And so to kind of bring this back to the beginning, like our strengths, our weaknesses, I mean, honestly, everything, like all of our impulses and instincts that we've been talking about, like we are a product of all the days that came before today, right? And so, for our couples who are either just getting married or having children, like the way that they have lived their lives probably vastly kind of like outnumbers their season of parenting or marriage, right? And so they have to show themselves a little bit of grace. Like it takes a long time to unlearn and then learn something new. But I think that even if there's been a lot of days before us, like there's also a lot of days ahead of us, right? And I think that you just have to tell yourself that it is never too late to change and that you can start small things today. And that even though we might have inherited patterns of dysfunction or unhealthy defaults, it doesn't mean that we have to keep them. I think that we can learn new things all the time. For example, that you and your spouse can bring different instincts and strengths into parenting, and that's not a flaw in the design, like that is a design. And, even if you believe all this and like you're doing your best and you believe that your partner's doing your best, like parenting is hard and there's just no way around that. And so if you take nothing else from today, I mean, I would just ask that you remember that when parenting feels hard, it doesn't mean that you're failing. It means you're being formed, right? There's nothing accidental about our journeys. And at the end of the day, like we're still all children of God. And, he's never done teaching us either.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I realize we've been talking for almost an hour, but I can keep going.
No, I think we're good. I don't have anything else.
Okay, good.
I wanted to
That's
be mindful
great.
about the episode length too.
Yeah. No, but everything you said is incredibly encouraging and challenging at the same time. And I really hope that our parents that are struggling really listen to this and practice the things that you shared. And I love that this is the church. And so we're here for one another. And I hope that our couples really take all the words from today. And I hope that you're encouraged.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As we come to the end of this episode of Living Stones, we hope you've been encouraged and helped as you think about parenting, not as a perfect formula to master, but as a shared calling shaped by grace, humility, and faithfulness. If you found value in today's episode, we encourage you to share it with others. Remember that you are not alone in this journey. We are members of God's household, united by our shared faith in the Lord and our desire to grow together. So until next time, may God's grace and peace be with you all. Thank you for being a part of Living Stones.